All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a close look at a highly specific and frankly fascinating Black conservative perspective that pushes back hard on the usual mainstream narratives we hear about immigration. We're pulling directly from a YouTube channel called A Righteous Perspective. They're diving into exactly why some Black Americans actively support Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Now, remember, we aren't here to take sides, we're just here to objectively unpack how they build this argument, piece by piece.
Right out of the gate, the source drops this absolute bombshell of a claim. Undocumented immigration is a major threat to the financial and social well-being of working-class Americans. I mean, talk about setting the stage, right? From this viewpoint, we aren't looking at some abstract political debate. No, it's framed as an immediate, literal threat to working-class folks. It's a high-stakes premise that anchors their entire worldview.
So to really wrap our heads around this, here is our roadmap. We'll start with how they frame the perspective, look at the economics of jobs and housing, demographic impacts, their defense of ICE, question some activist priorities, and finish with their ultimate political warning. Let's get into it.
Section 1, Framing the Perspective and Challenging the Mainstream Narrative.
According to our source, the way politicians and activists usually talk about immigration, it totally misses the mark when it comes to the day-to-day reality for some Black Americans. The core argument here is that mainstream activism just kind of overlooks the very real, on-the-ground impacts hitting low-income citizens the hardest. Basically, they're saying there is a massive disconnect between a protest in a city square and what's actually happening in these local neighborhoods.
Which brings us to Section 2, the economics of jobs and housing, or the local struggle for resources. Now things start escalating here. The source hones in on immediate local concerns, starting with blue-collar jobs. We're talking trucking, warehousing, home improvement. For a lot of people, these aren't just jobs. They are absolute lifelines. And here's the crucial part. They point out these industries are essential for citizens who desperately need a second chance, maybe someone with a prior criminal record who doesn't have a ton of options. The argument is that these exact roles are increasingly being filled by undocumented migrants willing to work for less, which directly undercuts vulnerable citizens who are just trying to rebuild their lives. Okay, let's pivot to housing. The speaker, who actually identifies as a New York City real estate agent, sets a really stark baseline for us: 100,000. That is roughly the number of homeless people currently living in NYC. Just keep that number in the back of your mind for a second.
Because here is how they break down the math. They take the estimated 600,000 undocumented migrants that have recently arrived. Now, using their real estate background, they estimate that if just 20% of those migrants secure housing, they're taking up about 120,000 apartment units. The conclusion they draw? It's pretty explosive. They point out that this number of occupied units is literally more than enough to house every single one of those 100,000 homeless citizens we just talked about. They are drawing a direct, straight line between migrant housing and the ongoing citizen homelessness crisis. All right, moving on to Section 3, Demographics and Social Impact, focusing on population concerns.
Over on the social side, the source makes a really stark demographic claim regarding abortion rates. Look at this. They point out that while Black Americans make up about 13% of the overall U.S. population, they account for roughly 40% of all abortions in the country. From this specific conservative perspective, this massive disparity isn't just a statistic. It's seen as a critical, self-inflicted issue. They argue it is actively holding the Black community back from growing its population share and building long-term generational power.
Next up, Section 4, the defense of ICE and prioritizing law enforcement.
Here, the speaker tackles mainstream criticisms of ICE head-on by asking this very question: is deportation based on race, or is it based on criminal records? They really want to challenge the narrative that ICE operates with racial prejudice. The whole goal here is to decouple immigration enforcement from accusations of racial bias, setting up a defense based purely on documented actions. So the point they're making is that ICE deportations are strictly driven by criminal behavior, not where you're from. And they bring the receipts, citing specific examples. They talk about a British national, someone the speaker describes as white as snow, who was found in Arkansas and deported for drug trafficking. Then a French citizen deported for identity theft and fraud. By highlighting cases from places like the UK and France, the speaker is arguing that ICE's true mandate is just removing criminals, regardless of their background, making the agency a total necessity for public safety. This staunch defense acts as a perfect launchpad into Section 5, questioning activist priorities. The speaker draws a super deliberate contrast here. On one side, you have massive amounts of time, energy, and money being poured into protesting ICE and local police. But on the flip side, they're asking, why does this same activist energy seem to completely ignore the immediate, deadly threats right in their own backyards? They specifically call out local gangs like MS-13, the Crips, the Bloods, and local drug dealers. It's essentially asking, why fight the people trying to enforce the law instead of fighting the elements actually destroying the neighborhood? And then the challenge gets deeply personal. The source points this question directly at protesters who immigrated to the U.S. They ask, hey, if you have all this incredible passion and energy to fight the system, why wasn't that energy used to fix the systemic problems back in your home country before you left? It's a highly provocative question, and it's intentionally designed to challenge the legitimacy of modern activist movements.
Which brings us to the climax in Section 6, the ultimate political warning.
This is where all those economic and social threads weave into one massive existential claim. The language here is incredibly strong. The source actually describes opponents of ICE and supporters of undocumented immigration as treasonous, labeling them the New Age Communist Party. By using this kind of rhetoric, the speaker is mapping out a worldview where today's activism isn't just some random grassroots movement. No, it's viewed as a highly orchestrated, dangerous agenda designed to dismantle the country from the inside out.
Here's how they see this master plan playing out. They outline a deliberate three-step process they believe is happening right now. Step 1, normalize and push for socialism. Step 2, disarm the public by attacking the Second Amendment. And step 3, once the public is defenseless, fully implement communism. From this perspective, immigration debates and anti-police protests, they're just stepping stones in this much larger, terrifying plan.
Ultimately, the big takeaway from this explainer is that for this source, this is absolutely not a simple policy debate about border control. For them, it is a fundamental, existential battle for the nation's survival. We're talking about the country's economic structure, its social priorities, literally its entire political future. They genuinely believe that if the working class doesn't wake up to these threats, the country as they know it is gone.
We've unpacked a very intense, very specific worldview today, sticking strictly to the claims presented in our source material. And that leaves us with this provocative thought to chew on. In a climate of such intense polarization, where different communities legitimately feel their very survival is threatened by one another, who is actually responsible for taking the first step to bridge that divide? Can we even find common ground, or are we just too far apart at this point? Thank you so much for exploring these concepts with me today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.